Most men will hear this too late. They will look back at moments they thought meant nothing, simple questions, casual conversations, harmless curiosity, and suddenly realize they missed something important. Not because they weren't attractive, not because they weren't good enough, but because they didn't understand what was really happening in those moments. If you've ever walked away from an interaction confused, replaying it in your head, wondering why the energy shifted or why she suddenly lost interest, this is why. You were responding on the surface while the real conversation was happening underneath. And no one ever taught you how to listen at that level. What you're about to hear isn't dating advice in the way you're used to. It's not about lines, tactics, or tricks. It's about psychology, about how attraction forms quietly, long before anyone makes a move, about the signals women send without ever saying what they mean, and the signals men send back without realizing the damage they're doing. This will challenge the way you've been taught to show confidence. It will make you uncomfortable if you're used to proving yourself, explaining yourself, or chasing clarity. But if you stay until the end, you'll understand why some men seem effortlessly magnetic without trying, while others exhaust themselves and still get overlooked. By the time this ends, you won't hear questions the same way again. You won't rush to speak. You won't feel the need to impress. You'll start noticing moments you used to miss and understanding why attraction either grows or disappears in seconds. Most men never learn this, and once you do, you can't unsee it. Most men believe flirting looks obvious. They think interest announces itself loudly, clearly, and without ambiguity. They imagine attraction arrives through compliments, physical closeness, or direct statements. But intelligent women don't operate that way, especially women who are emotionally aware, socially experienced, and selective. They don't pursue attention, they observe behavior. And the way they observe is through questions that seem innocent on the surface, but are deeply diagnostic underneath. When a woman asks you something that feels casual, it is rarely casual. It might sound like curiosity, but psychologically it is calibration. She is trying to understand who she is standing in front of, not through what you claim, but through how you respond when the spotlight subtly turns toward you. Questions are her safest entry point because they allow her to assess without exposing herself. This is where most men misread the moment. They hear a question and assume it's about information, so they answer with facts, lists, explanations, justifications. They think the more detailed the response, the better the impression. But attraction doesn't work on data. It works on orientation. She isn't measuring your RA, she's measuring your internal state. A woman who asks about your work isn't interested in the job title. She's sensing whether your identity is stable. Does your sense of worth collapse if the topic shifts away from success? Or do you speak from a place of calm ownership where your work is something you do, not something you are? The way you answer tells her whether you're anchored in yourself or leaning on external validation. This is why women often ask questions that appear oddly timed or slightly personal. It's not randomness, it's strategy. Questions allow her to approach without chasing, to engage without risking rejection, and to withdraw without embarrassment if the response doesn't feel right. From a psychological standpoint, it's a low-risk, high-information move. Men often fail here because they don't realize they're being wise-reds. They assume attraction is about impressing, so they switch into performance mode. They try to sound interesting, accomplished, or agreeable, but performance introduces tension, and tension communicates insecurity, even when the words sound confident. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Women are not listening as closely to what you say as they are to how you carry yourself while saying it. Do you rush? Do you overtalk? Do you try to control the outcome? Or are you relaxed enough to let the moment breathe? When she asks, "What do you usually do on weekends?" she's not looking for activities. She's asking whether your life feels full without her presence, whether you move from intention or from boredom. Men who answer from boredom expose need. Men who answer from direction expose stability, and stability is deeply attractive. Another common mistake men make is assuming that if a woman is asking questions, she wants reassurance. She doesn't. Reassurance is something insecure people seek. What she wants is clarity. Clarity about your emotional posture, clarity about your self-respect, clarity about whether you're centered or reactive. This is why women often ask questions that subtly challenge you. Questions about your past, your choices, your relationship history, not to interrogate, but to see whether you've integrated your experiences or are still carrying unresolved emotion. A man who speaks bitterly about his past reveals more than his story, he reveals his present. A man who speaks with reflection reveals growth. And here's the part men rarely understand: women ask questions to see if you will betray yourself under pressure. Will you adjust your answer to please her? Will you soften your standards to maintain approval? Or will you remain honest even if the truth isn't designed to impress? A man who alters himself mid-conversation communicates that his identity is negotiable. A negotiable identity never feels safe. Attraction requires a sense of emotional gravity, something solid to lean into. Questions help her locate that gravity. Philosophically speaking, attraction is not about being chosen. It's about being recognizable. When a woman asks questions, she is trying to recognize you, not the version you think she wants, but the version you actually are. That recognition only happens when you answer from authenticity, not strategy. This is why silence often does more than words. A brief pause before responding signals self-trust. It shows you're not scrambling for approval, you're considering your truth. That pause communicates maturity more effectively than any clever line ever could. Men often underestimate how sensitive women are to incongruence. If your words say one thing but your tone, body language, or pacing say another, she will trust the nonverbal every time. Questions expose these inconsistencies quickly. That's why they're such a powerful filter. Another subtle but critical point: women use questions to see whether you can hold space. Can you stay grounded while being the focus of attention? Can you remain present without becoming self-conscious? This matters because relationships require emotional containment. If you can't handle light pressure in conversation, you won't handle real pressure in life. Men who understand this stop fearing questions. They stop seeing them as tests to pass and start seeing them as opportunities to reveal steadiness. They answer honestly, briefly, and without emotional charge. They don't overshare, but they don't hide. They let their orientation speak for itself. And paradoxically, this is what creates intrigue. Not mystery built through withholding, but depth built through presence. When your answers feel anchored, she doesn't need more information, she feels enough. So if there is one shift men must make, it is this: stop treating questions like hurdles and start treating them like windows. Windows into your values, your pacing, your emotional regulation. The more comfortable you are standing in who you are, the more naturally attraction unfolds. Because the men who succeed here are not the most impressive, they are the most internally consistent. And that consistency is rare. In the end, women don't ask questions to be entertained. They ask to determine whether the man in front of them is someone they can feel calm around, respect deeply, and trust intuitively. And the moment you realize that, you stop trying to impress. You simply show up as yourself, fully, quietly, and without apology. Once you understand that the question itself is rarely the test, everything changes. Because what's actually being observed in that moment is not your intelligence, your success, or even your charm. It's your emotional posture. The way you respond when attention lands on you reveals far more than the content of your answer ever could. Most men assume they are being evaluated on correctness. They think there is a right answer hidden somewhere, and if they can just find it, the interaction will move in their favor. But attraction does not operate like an exam. It operates like a mirror. A woman is watching how you see yourself reflected in her attention. When a woman asks you a question and looks at you closely while you respond, she is not waiting to be impressed. She is watching whether your nervous system stays regulated. Does your voice speed up? Do you start filling silence compulsively? Do you laugh excessively to soften your own words? Or do you stay grounded, measured, and clear? These micro-reactions are not conscious choices. They are habits formed by how comfortable you are with yourself, and women are exceptionally attuned to them. That's why men who say all the right things can still feel strangely unattractive, while men who say very little can command presence without effort. One of the biggest attraction killers is urgency. The moment you rush to answer, rush to explain, or rush to clarify, you communicate something important that you feel pressure to be understood, and pressure always implies fear of loss. Fear of loss signals scarcity. Scarcity erodes attraction. A calm reaction, on the other hand, communicates abundance. It says, I am not performing for this moment. I am comfortable being seen. That comfort is deeply disarming because it is rare. Most people are desperate to control how they are perceived. The man who doesn't rush that process stands out immediately. There is also a philosophical layer here that most men never consider. How you react under attention reveals whether your identity is internal or external. An internal identity means you derive stability from your values and direction. An external identity means you derive stability from approval and response. When a man with an external identity is asked a question, he subconsciously asks himself, what answer will make me liked? When a man with an internal identity is asked the same question, he asks, what is true for me? That difference is subtle, but it is everything. Women don't consciously analyze this distinction, but they feel it. One response feels hollow, rehearsed, slightly needy. The other feels solid, calm, self-possessed. Even if the words are similar, the energy behind them is not. This is why over-explaining is so damaging. Over-explaining is rarely about clarity, it is about anxiety. It is the mind trying to secure acceptance through volume. But the more you talk to convince, the more you reveal that you don't fully trust your own position. A woman who is emotionally perceptive will feel that immediately. Not as judgment, but as information. She will sense that you are not settled within yourself, and attraction requires a sense of emotional ground. Without ground, there is nothing to lean into. Another common reaction men have is defensiveness. Questions about past relationships, lifestyle choices, or priorities can trigger a need to justify. But justification suggests unresolved tension. It tells her that parts of your identity are still under negotiation, still sensitive, still unstable. A man who reacts calmly without defensiveness signals integration. He communicates that his past is not something he is running from or trying to rewrite. It is something he has learned from and absorbed. That emotional integration is profoundly attractive because it signals maturity. Silence plays a crucial role here. Most men are uncomfortable with pauses. They rush to fill them because silence feels like failure. But silence, when held with composure, is not absence. It is presence. A pause before answering shows self-trust. It says, I don't need to rush to be acceptable. That pause gives weight to your words. It allows the interaction to slow down. And when things slow down, emotion has room to form. Attraction does not grow in chaos, it grows in stillness. There is also something deeply respectful about a man who listens fully before responding. Not just to the question, but to the tone behind it. Is she curious? Is she playful? Is she testing? Adjusting your response to the emotional context rather than just the literal words demonstrates emotional intelligence. Men who fail here often respond mechanically. They answer the question, but miss the moment. They miss the invitation to connect at a deeper level. And connection is never built through information exchange. It is built through emotional attunement. Another subtle but powerful aspect of reaction is boundaries. When you answer without overgiving, you show that your inner world is not immediately accessible to everyone. You share, but you don't spill. That restraint communicates self-respect. Self-respect is one of the most magnetic traits a man can possess. It shows that you value your time, your experiences, and your inner life. Women are not drawn to men who reveal everything instantly. They are drawn to men who reveal intentionally. When your reaction is calm and contained, you allow curiosity to build naturally. You don't force interest, you invite it, and invitation always feels better than pressure. Over time, these reactions create a pattern. A man who consistently responds with clarity and composure becomes predictable in the best way. Predictability here doesn't mean boring, it means emotionally safe. And emotional safety is the foundation of lasting attraction. This is why the men who leave the strongest impression are often not the loudest or the most entertaining. They are the ones who remain steady when others become reactive. Their presence regulates the room rather than competing with it. So if you want to change how women experience you, don't focus on crafting better answers. Focus on cultivating better responses. Regulate your nervous system. Slow your pace, allow silence, speak only what needs to be said. Because in the end, attraction is not created by what you say when asked a question. It is created by who you become in the space between the question and the answer. And that space, when held with confidence, tells her everything she needs to know. There is a moment where attraction quietly collapses, and most men never notice when it happens. Not because they did something offensive, not because they said the wrong thing, but because they started explaining themselves. The need to prove, the need to justify, the need to make sure she understands their value. That moment is subtle, but psychologically decisive. When a man begins to prove his worth, he unintentionally communicates that his worth is not self-contained. An attraction cannot grow towards something that feels uncertain about itself. Most men believe demonstrating value is the same as embodying value. It isn't. Demonstration is external. Embodiment is internal. And women are far more responsive to what is embodied than what is advertised. When a man talks excessively about his achievements, his ambitions, or his sacrifices, it often sounds impressive on the surface. But beneath it, there is usually an unspoken hope, please see me as enough. That hope creates tension, and tension tells her that this man is still negotiating his self-worth. Psychologically, the need to prove comes from fear of invisibility, from the belief that if you don't explain yourself, you'll be overlooked. But attraction is not created by loudness. It is created by certainty, and certainty never needs to announce itself. Women sense very quickly when a man is trying to earn approval instead of assuming belonging. The man who believes he must earn his place will constantly adjust himself to remain accepted. That adjustment erodes polarity. It makes his presence feel flexible, unstable, and reactive. A man who does not need to prove himself moves differently. He does not rush to be understood. He does not feel threatened by silence. He does not inflate his story to command interest. He trusts that his presence alone is enough to hold space. This is not arrogance. Arrogance is loud insecurity. This is quiet self-trust. One of the most revealing moments is when a woman challenges a man, even subtly. She may question his choice, tease his perspective, or disagree lightly. A man who needs validation will immediately defend. He will explain why he's right, why his decision makes sense, why he deserves approval. But defensiveness is a confession. It says, I need you to agree with me for me to feel okay. And that dependency dissolves attraction faster than almost anything else. The man who is secure does not rush to convince. He listens. He considers. He may clarify, but he doesn't fight for acceptance. He allows disagreement without collapse. That emotional steadiness is deeply compelling because it signals inner authority. Philosophically, attraction follows authority of self. When a man stands comfortably in his choices without seeking permission, he communicates that he trusts his own judgment. That trust makes others trust him too. This is why men who constantly explain their past relationships struggle to remain attractive. Over-explaining history often reveals unresolved attachment. It tells her that the past still defines the present. But a man who has integrated his past does not narrate it extensively. He references it lightly, with reflection rather than emotion. Women are not afraid of a man with a past. They are wary of a man who is still living inside it. Another common way men try to prove themselves is by being overly agreeable. They align their opinions, soften their preferences, and dilute their boundaries to maintain harmony. But harmony without authenticity is fragile. It feels hollow. A man without clear standards cannot be respected deeply because respect grows from differentiation. When everything about you is adjustable, there is nothing to anchor attraction to. Strong men are not rigid, but they are rooted. They can listen without dissolving. They can adapt without abandoning themselves. That balance is rare, and rarity is magnetic. There is also an important distinction between confidence and confidence seeking. Confidence seeking is performative. It needs feedback. Confidence is self-referential. It exists regardless of response. When a man constantly checks her reaction to see if he's doing well, he leaks power. His attention turns inward, toward his performance, instead of outward, toward connection. The interaction becomes transactional rather than relational. Women feel this shift immediately. The moment you start watching yourself through her eyes, you stop being present, and presence is the foundation of attraction. Men often believe that if they don't explain their value, it won't be seen. But the opposite is true. Value that needs explanation rarely feels real. Value that is lived feels obvious. Think of the men you respect most. They likely don't speak often about their worth. They don't justify their choices endlessly. They move with quiet conviction. Their energy says, "This is who I am," not "please approve of who I am." That same principle applies here. A man who knows his worth allows others to discover it organically. He doesn't interrupt that process with persuasion. He understands that attraction grows through observation, not instruction. This doesn't mean being distant or cold. It means being settled, warm, but not eager, open, but not overexposed, engaged, but not invested prematurely. When you stop trying to prove yourself, something remarkable happens. The pressure leaves the interaction, space opens, curiosity replaces evaluation, and she begins to lean in, not because you asked her to, but because you didn't need her to. That shift is profound. Because in the end, the most attractive thing a man can communicate is not how valuable he is, but how little he needs to convince anyone of it. And the moment you stop proving, you start being perceived exactly as you are. There is a reason silence makes so many men uncomfortable. Silence removes the mask. It removes the performance. It leaves only presence. And presence is where truth is felt. Attraction does not grow in noise. It grows in the spaces where something real can be sensed. This is why silence, when held with confidence, becomes one of the most powerful signals a man can send. Most men equate silence with absence. They assume that if they are not speaking, they are losing ground, losing attention, losing relevance. But in psychological terms, silence is not emptiness. It is containment. It shows that you are not dependent on stimulation to feel alive or validated. You are comfortable occupying space without filling it. Women are acutely sensitive to this. When a man rushes to talk, to entertain, to keep the moment alive, he communicates anxiety. When a man allows pauses, he communicates control, and control over oneself is always more attractive than control over others. Silence also reveals standards. A man who speaks only to be liked speaks often. A man who speaks with intention speaks selectively. That selectivity signals discernment. It suggests that not everything deserves access to his thoughts, his time, or his emotional energy. Standards are not announced. They are lived. They show up in what you tolerate, what you respond to, and what you ignore. When a man has no standards, he overgives. He overexplains. He accepts misalignment just to stay connected, and in doing so, he communicates that connection matters more to him than self-respect. Self-respect is the quiet foundation of attraction. It is not loud, it does not demand attention, but it is felt immediately. A man who respects himself does not chase validation. He does not rush intimacy. He does not collapse his boundaries to maintain interest. Women don't fall for men who accommodate everything. They are drawn to men who are selective. Selectivity signals value. If everyone gets access to you, then access means nothing. But when your time, attention, and emotional availability are offered deliberately, they become meaningful. This is where silence becomes a filter. When you don't rush to respond, you allow people to reveal themselves. You observe how they handle space. Do they become anxious? Do they overtalk? Do they seek reassurance? Or do they meet you in that calm? Silence reveals compatibility faster than conversation ever could. Another overlooked truth is that silence creates polarity. Polarity requires contrast, movement, and stillness. Expression and restraint. When a man embodies stillness, it allows the dynamic to unfold naturally. The woman feels free to express, to lean in, to explore. And that leaning creates attraction. Men often believe attraction is built by doing more, showing more. But in reality, attraction is often built by not doing what others do, not chasing, not filling every gap, not explaining every thought. There is also a deep philosophical element here. Silence is a sign of internal alignment. When your inner world is calm, you don't need external noise to distract you from yourself. That calmness is contagious. It regulates the emotional environment around you. Women are drawn to men whose presence feels grounding, not exciting in a chaotic way, but steady in a reassuring way. That steadiness allows desire to deepen because it feels safe. Safety is not the opposite of passion, it is what allows passion to last. Self-respect also shows up in how a man handles boundaries. When something doesn't align with his values, he doesn't argue excessively. He doesn't seek validation for his discomfort. He simply steps back. That quiet withdrawal speaks louder than confrontation ever could. Men who lack self-respect often overstay. They remain in situations that drain them, conversations that diminish them, dynamics that confuse them. And every time they tolerate what doesn't align, they teach others how to treat them. Attraction erodes when a man abandons himself to be chosen. A man with standards is not rigid or cold. He is warm but discerning. He listens, but he also evaluates. He engages, but he doesn't attach prematurely. This balance creates tension in the best way. It invites curiosity. Women sense when a man's life is full, not busy but meaningful. When his world does not revolve around potential attraction. When his time is structured by purpose, not availability. That fullness makes his attention feel valuable, not desperate. This is why men who are deeply engaged in their lives often appear more attractive without trying. They are not chasing connection, they are choosing it. And choice is far more compelling than pursuit. Silence also allows mystery to exist. Not artificial mystery created by withholding, but natural mystery that comes from depth. Depth cannot be revealed all at once. It unfolds over time. A man who allows that unfolding creates anticipation. Anticipation is the emotional fuel of attraction. When you combine silence, standards, and self-respect, you create a presence that does not ask to be noticed. It simply is. And people lean toward what feels solid. So many men exhaust themselves trying to be impressive when all that was ever required was to be grounded, to slow down, to stop explaining, to let moments breathe. The shift is subtle but transformative. You stop asking, how do I keep her interested? And start asking, does this align with who I am? That single shift recalibrates everything, because the man who knows when to speak, when to pause, when to engage, and when to walk away is not trying to create attraction. He is living from a place that naturally attracts. And that is the difference between being desired briefly and being remembered deeply. So reflect on this: silence is not your absence. It is your confidence speaking without words.